Welcome back, listeners. I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing podcast. And we have again with us, again for part two, Mr. Andy Regal. I'm super, super excited. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing great, Robin, and thanks again for this opportunity.
No problem at all. So, we're definitely going to kind of stay on track with the bullying in the workplace as well. But I kind of wanted to just touch base on where do we even leave off, Andy? Because I know you said you still had a few things to add as well.
Oh, so much to talk about. And our first conversation was really productive and helpful. And I hope your audience felt the same way. I certainly did, because I learned from every person I talked to. You're a bully victim. You're an expert in that respect as well. And it is all about healing. So, um, and the 40 minutes or 45 minutes we did last time went so fast. So I'm so thrilled to have the opportunity to continue the conversation. I guess there's a lot to talk about. In fact, as we talked about off air a little bit, Stranger Things is the phenomenon on Netflix. And for those that haven't watched it, it is probably the most celebrated television show that exists out there today. It's a sci-fi show about a group of kids fighting a horrible monster who's trying to basically take over the world.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a sci-fi fan particularly, but my kids got me into it. And the production values are incredible. Now, you might be wondering, if you're listening to this podcast, why are Robin and Andy going into detail about a sci-fi Netflix hit when you're supposed to be talking about healing
Really.
and bullying? Well, okay, I'll get to that now. Which, in real life, two of the primary stars, a female star who's a young woman and a male star who's a middle-aged man, the female star has accused in real life, not in the show, not in the script, in real life, of bullying her in a very harsh and terrible way.
Mhm.
It's alleged, and it's been ongoing. There's been some talk about they've reconciled or whatever, but it became a big issue in the fall when this came out, and became a big issue because people are so interested in the show, and you feel bad because there's this big hit, and these two characters are in a lot of scenes together. So
Absolutely.
obviously there's some significant discord such that it even made the press. So the reason that I'm interested in this is because it did make headlines all over the place. Everybody covered this. Um, it really wasn't determined what exactly happened, and we're not sure how it was reconciled or solved. They've continued to tape the shows and so forth. But it really got me thinking a lot about how we see bullying in the workplace make headlines when it's a famous director on Broadway, let's say, and that happens.
Yeah.
Or in this case, a big TV show. And we've seen it with like Ellen DeGeneres with her show, you may recall. They had all kinds of issues. Rosie O'Donnell was a talk show host. There was allegedly bullying on her set, toxic environment. So we hear about it with these celebrities. And my point is, each time I wonder why the conversation doesn't go to the real world, so to speak, to say, well, if this is happening in Hollywood and it's making headlines and people are interested in it, why? Well, one, it's celebrities, but two, I think people relate to it, right?
Yeah.
It's a relatable story. We've all, most of us, had experience with some form of incivility or degradation in the workplace. If it wasn't relatable, I don't think people would care so much, but they're like, wow, it's happening to celebrities and it's happened to me. And so my issue is, and what I'm trying to do, and you're doing with your wonderful podcast, we're trying to bring more attention and dialogue to this issue. But what's happened is when these headlines are made, it then just goes away.
Mhm.
And the work that I'm trying to do in my advocacy in anti-workplace bullying is to say, I'm glad to see that headlines are made in Hollywood or on Broadway and other places with celebrities when this happens. But
Right.
I want to give notice to and attention to the fact that this happens to millions and millions of people on a daily basis. And that's why I'm here, and I appreciate the opportunity to spread that message on your podcast.
Absolutely. And so, what I was kind of confused because when I was reading, it stated here that bullying is still legal in the workplace. So, help me kind of understand that and elaborate on that.
Sure, happy to, because people are so confused by this, and this is
Yeah.
one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this issue, because it's really an interesting issue.
Mhm.
Um, because I'll step back a moment and talk about the fact that there are civil rights codes, right?
Mhm.
Sexual harassment is against the law. Discriminating against a handicapped person is against the law. Discriminating against a person of color or a
Mhm.
person who's like 50 plus, age
Right.
discrimination. These are things that are against the law. Now, they're often hard to prove, and we touched on this a little bit in our last conversation.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but it bears repeating, so we're very clear on this issue. There aren't that many bosses that are going and saying, "Hey, old man, get out of here. We don't like old people," or "Hey," and I'll use it quickly, "Hey, N-word,"
Mhm.
or "Hey, cripple."
Mhm.
These are inappropriate, horrible things, and we do have civil rights codes against that. But most bosses, I mean, if you do that, you deserve to be sued and worse.
Right.
But most bosses know much better than to say things like that.
Absolutely.
It's much more subtle.
Mhm.
The fact is, abusing somebody, bullying them in the workplace is completely legal. And the way we differentiate is, and the way I define it, is it's repeated targeted harm that has no benefit to the employee or the business.
Mhm.
No benefit. And that's the real harm that's done. And people, as we talked about last time, people end up having to go to a psychiatrist, end up with physical problems, emotional problems. They end up in the hospital. You and I talked about the fact that people end up, if they can even get to work, they cry on the way to work because they're
Right.
so unhappy. And these are people like you and me who are devoted and productive and loyal and just want to do a good job. And yet the circumstances, for whatever reason, work against us. So that's the harm that's done. And yet people end up in the hospital and they have no recourse.
Right.
And that's why, again, when your show is all about healing, there are millions of people, literally millions of people suffering
Mhm.
because they have no psychological safety, and by that I mean every day they go to work wondering what's going to happen to me today,
Right.
and they lose popularity, um, and everybody knows this is happening. So then people avoid you because you're kind of like the plague.
Yeah.
You, you're concerned about not being able to pay your bills because you might lose your job.
Absolutely.
You so it's so damaging, so hurtful, so harmful, and there's no benefit to the business. In fact, we can talk about this more. It hurts businesses to do this
Yeah.
because they do it. People target the best people. So
Mhm.
that's why something must be done. And 2026 is the year where we need to make progress. Just like, again, I'm not comparing necessarily. I'm just saying, just like Black Lives Matter, the
Mhm.
Me Too movement, it was
Mhm.
wrong. It was horrible. And it was way too accepted, and finally people stood up and said, enough, no
Mhm.
more. And that's what we want to begin that process in terms of people being treated properly. Doesn't mean everybody has to be nice all the time. Doesn't mean bosses can't yell and scream. We all have bad days. This is about repeated harm, and people need to have some kind of recourse when they're being damaged.
And so when it says that it's legal in the workplace, is that just in Hollywood or is that overall as a whole?
In Europe and Canada, it's a little bit better, but there
Mhm.
are no laws against mistreatment of people in the workplace in the United States. No laws
Okay.
whatsoever. So now, and the problem is that many of the bully bosses, and I don't know if this is a case for you, but the people that do this have power. That it's an abuse of
Yeah.
power. That's what bullying is,
Mhm.
simply stated, an abuse of power. And look, there's no way we're going to change. Workplaces are hierarchical, right?
Right.
There's the intern, and then there's the CEO and everything in
Right.
between.
Yeah.
And so people have power. Now, in many cases, they've earned it. And many
Mhm.
bully bosses are quite good at what they do.
Yeah.
And we call them, Robin, we call them brilliant jerks. These are people who are maybe the CEO, the number 2 or 3 or 4 person,
Yep.
and they feel emboldened because either they're the top person or they're very tight with the top person, and
Right.
that gives them leverage to abuse their power. And they may be great at what they do, Robin. They may be good salespeople. They may be great in a meeting. They're often very charismatic.
Yeah.
But they're hurting so many of us, and they're damaging the business. And so they shouldn't be allowed to get away with really bad behavior. And there's a spectrum of bad behavior. We can talk about that too. But they
Mhm.
shouldn't be allowed to get away with it simply because they have power and they can get away with it. And far too many companies and organizations allow it to happen, and it's got to stop.
And I 100% agree with you, Andy, because just to kind of share quickly about my situation that happened a few years ago, there was a sexual harassment claim that I filed, and I had to. It was, I believe, it was someone. The company's lawyer was there, the superintendent, I believe, or I think she was the deputy chief or something. It was some name that she had, and then the head of HR, the president of HR, was in this room together. And I kept asking myself, because after I filed the sexual harassment claim, the gentleman who did it was still in the same workplace with me, sitting side by side the very next day. So it was extremely, extremely uncomfortable. And I'm like, what is going on? So I go down to the office and then I speak to the head of HR. And I said, well, I'm just a little curious as to why no one has contacted me and why he's here with me. This is very uncomfortable. He knows that I filed the claim. What is going on? And he was just like, well, we have no reason to talk to you. And I didn't understand that. And I was just like, well, how is it that you don't have any reason to speak to me? And he said, well, we did get your claim. We saw the video. And when we watched the video, we didn't feel it was that egregious. And I'm just sitting here like, are you seriously blaming the victim? And then
Yeah.
for, and not to be kind of sexist, but to have a woman in the room with me while this man is telling me this, and I'm just sitting here bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
And they're just like, Robin, it's not that big of a deal.
Oh,
I mean, he just downplayed the entire thing.
yeah. Well, and it's true in bullying cases as well as sexual harassment cases. First of
Hmm.
all, in most cases, HR is not your friend. And I wish
Correct.
HR was your friend. And I have some thoughts on that. Because HR, how do those people get paid? They
Hmm.
paid, they get paid by checks signed by the CEO usually, or the
Yeah.
CFO, power players. And so they're going to go up against those people to protect you? No, they're going to protect the business. And
Right.
so one of the things we need to do is give HR departments autonomy and authority to investigate these claims
Hmm.
in a way where there aren't repercussions against them. And they
Right.
don't have that now. So going to HR, unfortunately, is unfortunately usually useless or worse.
Yeah.
And
I see that.
the fact that they didn't take your claim seriously is absolutely abhorrent. Um, and and most of us, and I don't know how far you took it, it's very difficult to hire a lawyer in the hopes of getting some kind of settlement.
Yeah.
Most of us don't have enough money to do that. It costs
Hmm.
thousands of dollars just to hire a lawyer, let alone figure out whether you're going to win your case.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's the horror of this kind of stuff. You're not believed, or
Hmm.
you're gaslit. Oh, you're being a little over dramatic.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that happened to you, Robin. And it shouldn't happen to anybody. And again, you could take it further.
Hmm.
In the case of bullying, they'll often do that. They'll say, "Well, we looked into it, and we think it's going to be fine. Just go back
Hmm.
to work." They don't take
Yeah.
it seriously. And here
Hmm.
you are in a horrible circumstance, with all kinds of psychological problems, and then you're sitting next to this person who's been doing this.
Yeah.
Um, Terrible story, happens all the time, and again, there are steps that we can take. There are laws being suggested. What I'm arguing for is that at the top of companies, they create bylaws and standards of conduct
Hmm.
that have real teeth so that everybody understands what's appropriate. And so then you would be able to say, this is what this person did to me. He touched me, or he
Hmm.
spoke to me in an inappropriate way. And you could see in the bylaws how that's unacceptable, and that therefore there must be repercussions to that person, not just where they kind of look at it and think about it. And this guy's he might even be the rainmaker. He might be the guy
Yeah.
that brings in the most money. That doesn't matter because
Mhm.
he's doing harm to the business. Um,
Right.
so again, that's a very common circumstance for both people who are sexually harassed in the workplace and also bullied in the workplace. That
Yeah.
there's no real follow through, and the person with the power comes out ahead. And by the way, and there's data on this. What happens most often is, and I'd be interested to understand whether you left, but most often the victim ends up leaving either of
Yep.
their own accord because they can't take it, um, and not because they got a great new job, but they
Mhm.
often leave because they have to leave for their own uh, self preservation,
Mhm.
or the company gets rid of them and finds a way to get rid of them.
Oh, yeah. It was like they were trying to drive me out. I became a
Yeah,
target. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. It was bad. And then I tried to go to the EEOC, and she said the same thing you said. It's very hard to prove.
yeah,
It's hard to prove when you're being bullied like that because they're not it's not discriminatory, right? You can't really pinpoint what it is that they're doing, even though you know that they're forcing you out.
yeah,
Once I did that, it's like I became the victim and I became targeted, and everyone was hating on me. Like, let's try to get Robin out of here. So I
yeah.
end up moving on my own.
Right, and I appreciate you talking about this, and I feel the same way, that it's such a taboo subject. Why?
Mhm.
Um, because so many of us feel that whenever we tell this kind of story, that the people who are listening, even if it's good friends, family, I always got the feeling, and maybe you do too, that people are going to go like, Andy, now look, I'm sure that they did. You must have done something wrong
Mhm.
not to be sexually harassed. Nobody should be
Mhm.
sexually harassed.
Mhm.
I'm talking about bullying now, or
I know what you mean.
mistreatment, but I want to be clear on
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Um, but not that anybody deserves to be bullied, but that the boss treated you this way, or hey, you must have done something. And I
Yeah.
can honestly tell you, sitting here, I did nothing.
Right.
And I
Absolutely.
talked to hundreds of bullying victims.
Mhm.
And yeah, none of us are infallible. I'm not saying that I was a perfect employee. What I'm saying was I was a great employee, hardworking. We can't have a perfect workplace, and we don't expect perfection from our bosses, nor should they expect perfection from us. The point is that and if you're not a good employee, by the way, you still don't deserve to be bullied. But if you
Mhm.
can't get it together, they should politely and calmly work to have you leave the company. Nothing wrong with that. I've let people go.
Mhm.
I was an executive producer in television in New York for 25 years. Um, I was an executive producer from the age of 32. And I had to let people go. I never did it cavalierly, even if they weren't good employees. If
Mhm.
you've ever lost your job, you never do that to somebody cavalierly, because it's the worst feeling in the world to head
Mhm.
home without a job. It's awful.
Mhm.
It's torture.
Absolutely. I
It's
can only
torture.
imagine. And Andy, can you tell us what exactly is a TV production executive? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so I worked at major cable networks, like
Mhm.
CNBC. I was an executive producer, MSNBC, the news network. I worked at a cable network as vice president of original programming called Court TV, where we covered real trials. I covered the O.J.
Yeah.
Simpson trial and the Jeffrey Dahmer trial, some of the biggest trials of the last 25 years or so.
Mhm.
And I was also global head of video at the Wall Street Journal. So I've 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 had good jobs. I was promoted in each of those jobs, but in every role I had, I found bullies. Bullies found
Right.
me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'd love to tell you a quick anecdote, if I may, Robin. I heard
Absolutely.
from a victim. I have a Facebook group, which I'd love for people to join if they're feeling like they're being victimized. It's on Facebook. It's a Facebook group called Navigating Workplace Bullying. If you search, you'll find it.
Mhm.
Um, and we have over 500 people there. And it's a lovely community of people who are understanding and compassionate, because they're all victims of workplace bullying. I had somebody write me just yesterday who just got a new job after a horrible workplace bullying circumstance. And she wrote to me and said, you've been helpful, which is, I love when I'm helpful to people, but more so, she was excited about the new opportunity, but also very concerned that her PTSD from previous bullying experiences would affect her in this new role.
Mhm.
And I wrote back to her and I said, the likelihood is that you're going to find difficult people in this job too. And that's what I found, Robin. And
Mhm.
every time, in fact, I have a book coming out, which we mentioned in the last show, but I was going to call my book, my title of my book, I thought it would be different. That was my first title of working title of my book, because in every job I decided I got out of that one. Now I'm starting a new job, and this time it'll be different. And
Yeah.
you know what?
This time it'll be different.
Guess
Never is.
what, Robin? It wasn't. I mean,
Yeah.
there's always going to be difficult people. Always. I defy anybody to call me up. I mean, people call me up. In fact, my daughter took a new job recently. She's just out of college, and she was like, "Everybody here is nice. Everybody's nice." It was the first few days,
Right.
right? Yeah. And so they're going to find difficult people. And what I work with bully victims, the way I coach people, because I have a coaching business, is I don't try to solve their bully problem. I
Mhm.
work with people on how they can adapt to the circumstance when you come across difficult, unreasonable people. And I say that very precisely. Bullies are unreasonable. And by that, I mean they can't be reasoned with.
Right.
I had a bully boss. You were never going to fix him. You were never going to knock on his door and say, "Hey, can we talk about, you know,
Right.
your behavior?" Or, "I'd feel a lot better, Mr. Bully Boss, if you would treat me this way, because I'm working 15 hours a day and I'm making you millions of dollars." And, an occasional, uh, uh, you know, appreciation, a thank you would really be a lot. It would mean a lot.
Right.
Never. That
Mhm.
conversation was never going to happen. Not
Right.
going to happen. So the thing you have to do is you have to be different. And it's not about self-blame. It's about keeping perspective, about not letting the boss overtake your well-being, your self-esteem, your self-worth. And I
Mhm.
talk a lot about, and I've gotten to know you a little bit through this process, but you have a very bright light in my view.
Yeah. Thank you.
And those of us who are good employees and nice people,
Mhm.
sometimes they can smell us coming. I always
Absolutely.
thought the bully boss, they knew that I would just go back and try harder. I
Yep.
wasn't going to scream and yell and take the bully on. They don't bully those people. They bully the people that they know are just going to go sit back down and try harder. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I told this woman, remember who you are. So because in this job, it's likely if everyone's wonderful, great, you have no problem. But I told this woman who got this new job, I said, remember who you are. So when there is a difficult person, just accept that that's on them. That's them, not you.
Mhm.
And do your best to negotiate a circumstance, but just keep being you. And don't let them overwhelm you so that you lose your joy, you lose your self esteem, you lose your ability to shine your light on others. That's the best we can do.
Right.
Because we just, as much as we'd love to, with each new job, find that utopian environment, I don't know anybody. In fact, everybody I talk to um, who tells me, "Oh, what do you do? What do you do?" And I'm anti-workplace bullying. I have a book coming out and so forth. People can't wait to say, "Oh," just like in the case when we met, I didn't know you were a bullying victim. You're a bullying victim. Almost everybody has something where they've been treated. And again, it's along the spectrum. I ended up um, being depressed, having
Mhm.
digestive problems. We talked about this last time, harmful thoughts. Um,
Mhm.
and I'm a very successful person. And I'm also a good person.
Mhm.
And I think I was a good boss. So it's about us understanding what's happening with these circumstances, and as painful as they are, and we may even lose our jobs over it, and the bully may win in a way, that we
Mhm.
can keep our integrity, keep our dignity, and most importantly, keep our health and our mental well-being if we know how to handle it better. Doesn't mean you're going to be happy, doesn't mean you're going to skip into work, can't wait,
Mhm.
but this notion where people are so damaged by what's happening, and I talk to them every day, um, that they need recourse and they need help, and there are resources now for those of us who have gone through this.
Absolutely. And I really feel, Andy, because you had mentioned the woman who was suffering from PTSD. I really wish that they would implement mental health days, at least 2 or 3 mental health days a month, kind of utilize them as floating holidays because it's very needed. And I really feel that a lot of people turn a blind eye towards mental health. A lot of people just, what I mean? It goes in one ear right out the other, but it's like the severity of mental health. It's damaging. It's almost crippling, as you stated before, to a lot of us, especially because we're walking around internalizing and just not saying anything. Meanwhile, we're crushed on the inside. And when we go home, it's just like you never know what's going to happen to the person when they're outside of work.
Yeah. And as we know, most of us take work home in one way, shape, or form. I mean, it may just
Mhm.
be I have a big project and I'm bringing it home and you might have to work at home, but I mean, you're thinking about it. And maybe
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure on that project. But more so, if you're feeling like the boss is mistreating you,
Hmm.
boy, oh boy, do you ever bring it home. At least I certainly did. And I bet you
Yeah.
did too. I mean, look, you were
Absolutely.
crying. I mean, it was just awful what was
Mhm.
happening to you, Robin. And so not only are we suffering with no psychological safety, we're sitting at our cubicles, our desks, in
Yeah.
our offices, whatever it might be, on the factory floor. It happened, bullying is everywhere, not just Hollywood. It's in every business. And so we then bring it home with us and we can't sleep. And
Mhm.
speaking of sleep, I wanted to mention something to you, which just happened to me last week. So we didn't get into it last time we spoke. So I had terrible recurring dreams of this primary bully boss that I write about in my book. I had dreams when I was in his employ, and we're talking about 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
But when I was in his employ, I had a recurring dream. Literally, this is the 100% truth, that we were both in a boiling cauldron.
Hmm.
Okay, he was half man, half beast.
Yeah.
He was attacking me in this boiling pot,
Hmm.
and attacking me as a beast. It was horrifying. It was kind of apocalyptic.
Yeah.
And I had a recurring dream of him doing that to me. Okay. Well, just last week, I had a dream, and I dream about him quite often, and the dreams have changed over time. I don't have this like apocalyptic apocalyptic type of dream any longer, but I had a dream last week where I was in his employ and I decided to talk to him about his behavior.
Yeah.
And I explained to him how the way he treats people was harmful to me. Also, and again, this is a dream, this is not real life.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm talking to him and he's listening. And I'm saying, look, it really hurts my feelings and it doesn't make me better. And I'm talking to him about, and I'm like, you're hurting the business. And it really would build everybody up if you were more civil and more understanding. And he said, I'm gonna try harder. I'm gonna do that. Okay. Now this bully was a bully before I met him and
Mhm.
continued I hear from people who are coming, he's still a bully
Right.
years.
Yeah.
So this isn't about him, it's about me.
Mhm.
I'm healing.
Yeah.
Look at the difference. And again, it's been 20 years. I'm still working on healing from all this stuff. I'm fine. I'm good. Um, but I'm still processing. And
Right.
that's how harmful and what an impact this kind of um, behavior has on employees.
Mhm.
Um, but look at that. I look at that as great progress. Look at how I'm healing. I'm now creating a positive environment, and it
Absolutely.
shows hope and healing that I wasn't being attacked in boiling color. I actually had a conversation with him where he agreed with me that it'd be better to not be so scornful.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it can happen. But these things last for decades. Trauma, and I'm not trying to overstate it. I didn't serve in a war, right? So when
Mhm.
we talk about PTSD, I want to be very clear. I wasn't in a foxhole with bombs going off,
Yeah.
but it's in the literature. I'm not a psychiatrist, a psychologist. I have lived experience. What I will
Yeah.
tell you though, Robin, is I've interviewed for my book dozens of experts from around the world who
Mhm.
look at this issue: neurobiologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, scientists, academicians, and PTSD is a part of this. And Trauma. This is a
Yeah.
trauma. Again, these people have so much authority over us, so much power over us.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, you lose your job, you don't know when the next paycheck's coming.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
and as you know, and you felt this, being part of something is integral in the human experience,
Hmm.
right? We like to go to work, many of us, because we like to be a part of a team, part of something bigger. And I've worked with a lot of startups where we're trying to build a business and be successful. I love that. I love
Yeah.
having a staff. Um, and so and I was ostracized, which I think is the worst
Hmm.
and most demeaning form of
Yeah.
bullying when they
Absolutely.
isolate you. And
Yeah.
and and here I had a situation where I'd been at a company for 7 years. They brought in a new CEO. I wasn't part of his team because I'd been part of the old team, and they isolated me. And it was absolutely the worst feeling I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Um, that you're worthless. You're worse than worthless. And so these are not trifling matters.
Yeah.
These are matters of huge emotional trauma. And the final thing I was going to say about this is that I've learned from experts that trauma is lodged in long-term memory,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And so,
Hmm.
in fact, it came out, Robin, that when I was writing my book, I'm writing about these circumstances like it was yesterday. And it
Yeah.
had been, in some cases, it was fairly recent, but in others, 10, 15, 20 years, I can remember what I was wearing. I remember the office it happened in. I remembered whether the boss had a cigarette in his mouth or in his hand.
Yeah.
It's right there. And we deserve better.
Absolutely. But what I love about it, though, Andy, is like you stated, it's not war, but it is psychological warfare. But I love what you said that there's no psychological safety. But in regard to not having that psychological safety, at the end of the day, those who have to go through it, like you and I have, we definitely are the victims of that. But look at what comes out of that, right? That pain becomes a part of you, and then you take it and you run with it. You start thriving with it. Now you're a coach. You're doing that. I'm doing. It's all about healing podcast. It's like all these stories come together to let other people know that they're not alone. You can fight this. You don't have to sit with it alone by yourself and just internalize and causing the depression, causing the harmful thoughts and things of that nature. And it gives people an outlet to reach out to. So I think that's the good side, the glass half full approach, I guess, as to why we have to endure some of the things that we have to endure as well.
Yeah, and life is like that, right?
Yeah.
And so resilience, I think, is a part of this,
Yeah.
Robin.
Yeah.
But and if anything, and I really did when I started writing my book. Another working title that I had was My Mediocre Career in the Media.
Yeah.
In many respects, I felt I was a failure, even
Hmm.
though I had these kind of lofty titles and so forth and got promoted. I couldn't understand why my bosses didn't love me. I
Yeah.
really, why didn't they love me like my parents did? And we talked a little bit about this last time that my parents, and I was a perfect kid, no
Yeah.
drugs, no alcohol, played sports, played a musical instrument. Um, and they loved me. Uh, and I don't think it was all performative, but and so when I went into the workplace, we talked about this last time. I thought, well, if I just work harder than anybody and I'm productive and useful
Mhm.
and helpful and a team player, the love's going to be flowing. And,
Right.
and and it's a naive way to enter the workplace. And it took me years to learn that lesson. And so another working title was My Mediocre, because I really didn't feel like I had succeeded, because at every turn, somehow they decided to get rid of me. And again,
Yeah.
even if I'm saying that, I'm thinking that um, your audience is me saying, well, you must have done something, that,
Right.
that you didn't stay one place for 20 years. But
Mhm.
I'm begging your audience to take my side in this.
Yeah.
And so resilience is something, Robin. It's laudable, but it's often unhealthy.
Hmm.
Being resilient just tore me down, and I'm proud of myself that I kept going.
Yeah.
I had a professor at Ohio State University that works on stress, trauma, and resilience at Ohio State University. He's brilliant. And I quote him liberally in my book. And he said to me, he goes, Andy, You didn't turn to drugs, did you, during these years? No,
Yeah.
didn't do that. Um, you didn't let it affect your marriage, right? I tried not to. I wasn't always a good parent or father because I was dealing with all these things, but no. And he said, and you got other jobs in your field? I did. He goes, well, look at that. You were resilient. So I
Yeah.
feel good about that. And bullying victims like yourself should feel good about being resilient, but it's often at the cost of a lot of pain and, again,
Absolutely.
damage to your health and well-being. And so what I would say is that you have to do what's best for you, but I don't suggest to people to confront their boss, and I also don't suggest to people just leave. And the other thing, some people say there was some advice that I came across that said, "Well, don't worry about being bullied because you'll get another job, and you'll never look back and think about that the bully has to live with themselves."
Yeah.
Please,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. They're not. They're not even
So
thinking about
I'll never look back.
it.
I've
Mhm.
taught, so many of us years and years later, and again, we're not debilitated, at least hopefully not years later. Some could be. You have to deal with this. You have to confront it. And I'm not one of those people that says, "Oh, everything happens for a reason and you'll be better off afterwards." I
Yeah.
don't I don't subscribe to that. Um,
Hmm.
none of us deserve it. But yes, to your very good point, we can survive and we can move on. I had bullying experience, and I'll give you a great example. I had a terrible bullying experience, and I was able to move on to another television show. It was called the Dr. Keith Abloh Show. We didn't talk about this last time.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Keith Abloh was like Dr. Phil. It was very much kind of like a Dr. Phil type of show. Um, and it was a psychiatrist who was going to help people. And his whole thing was empathy.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, this office and this television production team was the most toxic group of people I have ever come across.
Oh my goodness.
It was horrible. And so even, because I thought, oh, I'm going to start working for this guy. I was going to be a senior producer on this big show. It was going to be on NBC. Um, and I'm going to work for a host whose whole approach is empathy.
Yeah.
And so again, I thought this is perfect for me. I don't want to go into another bullying experience. And this guy's great.
Yeah.
He and the other people that led the show were just horribly toxic.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he ended up losing his license
Hmm.
because of inappropriate behavior with his patients. And I wouldn't be saying this because he could come after me, other than the fact that it was reported
Yeah.
widely in the Boston Globe. You know,
Come after me.
yeah. But it was, so you never know what this you can hope and look for an environment that's going to be good, but it's incumbent upon us to be able to understand how to deal with it. And resilience is one way, but also these other things we've been talking about working on your psychological safety, finding joy in life, finding the small wins at work, even under the bullying environment. Um, and whether it's music, reading, exercising, finding joy in the company of others, whatever those things are, we've got to focus on those things when things at work are really tough and unfair.
Absolutely. And just the realization of you're not rooted there. A lot of times we feel that there is no way out, but the thing is, it's like
Yeah,
you're not rooted like a tree there. You can get up and leave at any point. I mean, it's a lot easier said than done. Don't get me wrong, because I know it's not very easy to find a job. But we also have that feeling sometimes that it's like this is the end all be all. I have no choice but to deal with it. I have no choice but to stay here, stick it out, and it'll get better. And that was the best thing I ever did, was realize, what, I don't need this anymore. And I could just leave. And it was 1,000 times better once I finally just left.
yeah, and good for you to have the
Yeah.
fortitude to do that. Um, and that's not an easy thing to do for several reasons, and I'll give you my experience. First of all, I worked years to become an
Mhm.
executive producer, and so
Yeah.
I loved the work. Let me
Absolutely.
put it this way. I
Yep.
loved the work. I loved being in journalism and telling great
Yeah.
stories about the most important things going on in the world. Um, and so I love
Yeah.
my team, the people I
Yep.
worked with, I cared deeply for, and so, uh, and I
Yeah.
liked getting paid, and so, and maybe most of all, Robin, I didn't wanna let the
Yeah,
bully
that
win,
too. Yeah.
and so if I walked out, sitting at home wondering where the next paycheck was gonna come, I had to weigh which
Yeah.
is worse, and so good for you
Mhm.
to leave, um, and for some people, that's a good answer. I think that, the best answer is if you can leave and have at least some
Yeah.
opportunities, you started a
Yeah.
job search. Um, and sometime in my work coaching bully victims, I put on my kind of career guidance counselor hat as well, because I had to look for work more often than I
Yeah.
care to admit. And so, um, but in almost every case, other than this Dr. Keith Abloh show, um, and actually, talk about, people don't believe you. Somebody with the production company who knew me from a previous job came to that show to help out. She came to me and said, Andy, we know you're not the problem, even though they've treated you
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
problem. Um, and so I was
Mhm.
vindicated for the first time. She came to me and she said, we know that you're helping and there's problems. We just want to let you know you're not the problem. You're the solution maker and we
Yeah.
appreciate it. So it was like, because I was a
Mhm.
pariah. They had isolated me. They had tried to demote me and all this stuff. It's too long to get into. You could read my book and
Yeah.
find out more. Um, but it was awful. And it was like, I almost cried when she came to me and said, Andy, we're in LA. We know what's happening. We're coming to New York. So once in a while, and I'm sorry that you didn't get vindication
Mhm.
from the company that you were working at. You deserve
Yeah.
that and more. But we have to do what's best for us. But in my experience, most often, I stayed until they said get
Oh,
out.
okay. Yeah.
You
No,
know,
because with my company, I was there
and,
for
and
7 years. I had a lot of time invested. I mean, I wasn't there for 20, but still being there for 7 and
yeah,
having that investment in it and trying and not
right,
wanting, like you said, not wanting that bully to win. But it was like, what? I have to love myself first. I can't sit and constantly
yeah,
because it's like it's that self abandonment, right? It's like that self abandonment. It's you pay a high price when you're
you
putting
sure do.
yourself. You're just like, okay, I want this approval so badly, but that wanting that approval is a high price that you're paying that you can't afford, right? You end up in debt because of all this self abandonment. It's like I have to focus on me. I have to do what's better for me, and there is something else out there, even if it may take a little time to find it, but you will find that other thing.
Well, and as I said, this Dr. Keith Abloh show I thought was the bridge to
Mhm.
something better. It ended up being a bridge because it did get me somewhere else, and then that went to something else, and that's how you
Yeah.
have to look at it. That it was a worse job ultimately, but you have to find that there were some good things about it. There were some good things about it. It helped me get out of one situation, move to another. But the point I want to make here, and I think you'll appreciate this, Robin, is people say, why didn't you just leave? And we've been talking about that. It's
Mhm.
very similar. Now, there's some significant dissimilarities, but of domestic violence, domestic abuse. There's a lot of similarities. In fact, I know a lot about
Yeah.
domestic violence because my wife represents domestic
Mhm.
violence victims. So I'm very much aware
Mhm.
of that world. Because people say to domestic violence victims, well, why didn't
Right.
you just leave? Well, there's a lot
Mhm.
of reasons. One, you got to take your
Mhm.
kids somewhere. Two, how are you going to pay for things? Where are you going to go? It's not so easy just to say, "Oh, this man is abusing me, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave." It's a horrible circumstance to be in.
Absolutely.
Um, and in the case of where you're being, and again, when you're at the workplace, I'm not talking about
Mhm.
physical abuse. None of the stuff that I'm talking about is where somebody hits you, throws a stapler
Mhm.
at your head, pushes you. Again, that's why there's
Mhm.
laws against that.
Yeah.
That's assault, and you can deal with the police on that. What I'm interested in is this damaging treatment, the
Right.
psychological trauma that is created by this abuse, that can be as harmful as somebody putting their
Absolutely.
hands on you. And so there are a lot of similarities therein, and that's part of the problem of why people don't have recourse because their lives can be
Mhm.
ruined. It isn't the case, and I was lucky that I was able to find new jobs. Not everyone does. I've talked to so many people, but by the way, in the last circumstance of bullying, the next job I had, I made 50% of what I was. I never recovered to the point where I was making what I was making in the previous job, and that happens to most of us. If we're lucky enough to get another job, it's usually not as good as the previous one, from a financial standpoint. And many people never really recover, you know. So, and as a practical matter, and I had this happen, I would go on job interviews and someone would say to me, "Oh, you worked at this place. You must know so-and-so." And that might have been
Right.
the bully. And then I'd be sure that they were going to call him and say, "Oh, what," and that he was going to
Yeah.
talk me down. Now, I don't know that that ever happened. It probably didn't. It might have, but the bullying continues. It doesn't end the minute you leave that office, either of your own accord or because they say, "Get out." That bully remains with you, in my case, for years. But even as a practical matter, you go on the interview, and I've worked with clients of mine who say, "I've got a job interview." I had a person call me in an absolute panic. In fact, I was at a conference and I had to kind of go find a quiet place. He was in a panic because he was going to an interview and he was scared to death that the previous, because he knew it was a small kind of niche world, and he was convinced that during the interview they're going to bring up his horrible
Yeah.
bully boss. How was he going to deal with that? And this is a terrible issue, and again, having that boss on your shoulder or renting room in your head can happen for years and years
Yeah. And
afterwards.
like you said, with the domestic violence, and they say, well, why didn't they leave? And the same thing with the workplace bullying. Why didn't they leave? It also, like you said, it's psychological, it's trauma, it's past trauma, it's grooming, it's being baited. It's a lot of things that are involved when someone who hasn't gone through it or experienced it may never understand. And that's okay. It's not for everyone to understand, but as long as the victim going through it understands. And also, I believe that there shouldn't be any type of shame in being a victim of any kind. It's like, if anything, it's an honor
Correct.
because we're survivors. That's the way that I see it, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. We are survivors, and we should feel good about that, but there is so
Hmm.
much shame
Yes.
involved, and I talk about shame in the book, and I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Professor Yamada. He's a law
Hmm.
professor in Boston, and he's written quite a bit about the shame
Yeah.
involved, and he also is involved in trying to change laws. The reason I mentioned it is because we all feel that way. You and I both, and I acknowledge I felt that way all along. And that's why I didn't talk about it. And that's why this notion of you are not
Yeah.
alone is so important. Because when you hear from other people and you understand we've been through it and it's no fault of your own. Again, let's even assume that some of us, including me and you,
Mhm.
weren't the best employees. We made mistakes or whatever. You still don't deserve to be bullied. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
Again, as I said, I don't expect the boss to be perfect all the time, but bully bosses don't apologize and they never acknowledge their own mistakes. But boy, to boy, do they go after you
Yeah.
when you make a perceived mistake. And even then,
Absolutely.
I had bully bosses where I made no mistake and they came after me.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and let me give you a more positive example, if I may, and one that I think you'll appreciate, because I want to be positive about this. There is a way through.
Mhm.
Work is hard, but we can get through it, and adapt to it better. But let me
Yeah.
give you an example because it's not all negative. As I said, we're survivors. We move on. We get other
Mhm.
jobs. They may not be great jobs. The most important thing that I'm preaching, if you will,
Mhm.
is I want everybody who hears this, and you're an example of this, to say, I can still have a good life.
Yes.
I might not have as much money,
Yeah.
right? I might not have as much prestige. Okay. And maybe you will. Maybe the next job will be
Mhm.
better, and maybe it will provide what you enjoy your life. Life's too
Yes.
short. You have,
Mhm.
and bad things are going to happen no matter what. People are going to get sick.
Yeah.
Loved ones are going to die. We know this. And so while work is problematic, and it almost always is. I mean, how many people do you talk to say, work's great, everything's going. It doesn't, even without having a bully boss, there's all kinds of problems, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I wish it were so at some point.
Yeah.
Robin, let me tell you one quick story if I have time. Is that okay? Do we have time?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You're so delightful, and thank you again for allowing me to be on your podcast. So
No problem.
I worked at MSNBC
Hmm.
as an executive producer, and we were in war coverage. I had never done war coverage,
Okay.
and I had to train myself, and they just threw me into it, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Hmm.
And Lester Holt, you know Lester Holt?
No.
He was like the primary anchor at NBC News for like 25 years. Very
Okay.
famous anchor, NBC News. Totally respected throughout the industry. And because I didn't know what to do, we rushed into the control room, and there were people there, and I'm the executive producer, but I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm supposed to be pushing buttons and all this stuff. Lester Holt starts reading the teleprompter copy.
Hmm.
And I had been in the control room a week earlier training, and it sounds like what he's reading is exactly what was being read a week ago, but
Yeah.
not an update to the story, the same copy.
Yeah.
And then he reads the second story. And all of a sudden, the director turns to me as if I'm at a loss. It's my first time ever doing this, and I got no training.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Is this the right copy?" And the teleprompter operator, who's about a 22-year-old kid, puts his head in his hands and says, "Oh my gosh, I loaded last week's copy."
Yeah.
So here we are, Lester Holt, who's exalted. I mean, he's like the greatest thing ever. He's all this integrity, credibility, and he's reading last week's news
Uh-huh.
on the air.
Oh no.
And I'm the executive producer, so it's my fault.
Hmm.
Anyway, they throw it a break, and they figure it out. And for the next 3 hours, it went okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now I got to go outside and apologize. I got to go outside the studio and meet Lester Holt in the hallway and tell him, we had never even met ever,
Yeah.
even to this point, never met him. I go up to him and I say, "Lester, I'm so terribly sorry about what happened at the top of the show. I am new here, but I'm responsible. It was my fault. I didn't say anything about a young kid. I'm not going to blame it.
Right.
I'm
Right.
responsible."
Right.
And I was expecting him to say, "Look, you're never working here again."
Yeah.
He would yell and scream, and I was ready for it. I was ready to be demoted or fired.
Yeah.
He said, and I said, "I'm Andy Regal," and I said, "I'm sorry, it won't." He said, "Andy, these things happen." He goes, "It's very hectic. You were running into the control room. Just follow your other colleagues, follow their lead. You'll get it. I'm sure you're here for a reason. You'll do better. It'll work out, but follow." He gave me all kinds of advice. It was just about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
He was totally supportive, totally, kind, generous, understanding.
Hmm.
Shook hands, and he walked away.
Yeah.
And we worked together again, a few other, and it went fine. But it was a minute and a half conversation that he would never remember.
Hmm.
I'll remember it forever.
Absolutely. That's good. That's powerful.
Because right. And I made sure I was inspired to do better.
Hmm.
But he easily could have berated me,
Yeah.
screamed at me for humiliating him. Absolutely not. That's what we need more of in this world
Yeah.
and in our workplaces,
Absolutely.
because that's how you get loyalty and devotion. And I haven't seen Lester since then. I mean, since I worked there. And again, he wouldn't remember it, but I will remember him forever. He retired recently. And I only wish him well because he was an inspiration to me.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that story. And
Yeah.
again, what is the name of your coaching business?
Oh, yeah. So if people would like to reach me, if they're suffering, the easiest thing to do is go to Andy Regal, ANDYREGAL, andyregal.com. They can have a free consultation. If they think I can be helpful, great. If they want to stay on their own, there's no hard sell. But I love talking to bullying victims, and I love helping bullying victims, and because we can help each other. So that's something they can do. My book, if you don't mind me mentioning it, is called Surviving Bully Culture. And then the subtitle is A Career Navigating Workplace Bullying and a Guide for Healing, because there's all kinds of information about how to heal. And so we're here. We're here to help. You're not alone. I love this podcast because you're right. I love the title of your podcast.
Thank you.
It's all about healing, and it is, so that we can go on with our lives, appreciate the people that love us and care for us, because that's the thing I say. Don't let one person, don't let one bully overwhelm you and forget who you are.
Yeah.
Your friends love you. They care about you. Your family does. And so I allowed the bully to overtake everything about me. And we can't continue to allow that to happen. And so if we advocate and we work, we're going to change this one office and one person at a time, and we can really make a difference together with the work that you're doing, Robin.
Thank you so much, Andy. And it has been such a pleasure having you on here again. And it's always a fun time, even though we're talking about some traumatic events, but it still somehow is enjoyable.
Well, it's all about healing, and I appreciate, because these conversations help me heal too, and I really hope it helps the audience. So thanks to you as well.
No problem. And again, I'm Robin Black, and this is It's All About Healing Podcast. Everyone stay blessed.